Hi, and welcome to the first video for Chapter 9 in iOS development. In this chapter, we're going to talk about using a navigation controller to handle a fairly common sort of iOS application in which we have a list of things, and picking an item from the list of things causes another view to come up, and maybe a detailed view about the item you selected, and then you can make some processing of that item and then return to the main list. So first of all, let me demo this. We're going to use as an example an application in which we explore the available fonts on an iOS device, and we're going to look at the fonts as a list of font families. Then we're going to look at the individual fonts within a font family, and then from there we can look at an individual font in a given size, and we'll keep a list of our favorite fonts, which we can then edit. We haven't talked about editing the items in a list view, but it's almost no code at all to add editing features to a table in iOS. So as soon as the simulator launches here, I'll demo it. And while we're waiting on that to happen, let me talk about, it's taking longer than I expected to, let me talk about the structure of the app. So here in the project pane over here, you can see that we've created a number of view controllers. We also have a custom class to keep track of the favorites list. Oops. Here we go. So this is what the app shows on startup. We've got a list. These are font families, and this is a navigation controller with a table view doing the controlling. And we've got these font families, and down at the very bottom, we're also going to keep track of a list in another section of this table of our favorite fonts. And if we select one of the font families, Times New Roman, we go to see the variations of that particular font. So there's a bold italic version, italic version, and plain version. And there are two ways you can select another screen from this screen. You can either look at the font in a lot of different sizes, and the back button up here is part of the navigation controller. Navigation controllers keep sort of a stack of view controllers, and so when you go to a new view controller, you're pushing a view controller on the stack. There's always a back button to take you to the one that was there before, sort of like navigating in a web browser. But this is a common way of navigating through an app. It's actually so common that Android, which used a different mechanism for handling tables, has ultimately gone to something that looks more like what iOS does. So that, like I said, if you click just on the font, you go to the list, the screen with all the sizes. If you click on this sort of accessory item over here, oops, I clicked in the wrong place. It takes you to a screen where there's a slider that'll change the size of the font. And there's also a switch that will cause this font to be included in the list of favorites. So let's remember this one, Times New Roman PS - bold italic MT, and we'll see if that's in our favorites. So we'll go back in the view controller and back to our font family. Now we'll go down to our favorites, and there it is. It got added at the bottom, and these are some that I had added before. Now, something that you can do in the favorites list that we haven't been able to do with table views before is the edit feature. We can delete things or we can reorder them. Say I really don't want this Times New Roman. I can get rid of it. Get rid of the American typewriter bold. I can also rearrange things by grabbing these lines over here if I want to do that. Then when I'm done, I'll go back to this screen and then back to the home screen. So we've got a bunch of things to implement here, and let's get started. So we'll create a new project. In Xcode. We're going to use the single view app design pattern here because there's not a table view navigation controller pattern. We'll create that. And let's go ahead and go to the storyboard. Now we've got a view controller here in our storyboard. We're not going to use it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete it. But what I do want to add is a navigation controller. So in the library over here, I'll select that navigation controller and drag that here. And I get two scenes. I get my root navigation controller. I also get a root table view controller that's going to work with the navigation controller in terms of pushing and popping views and making all that stuff happen automatically for me. So since we got rid of the view controller in the storyboard, we're going to delete the class here as well. We want to make this navigation controller our start controller. So I'll click in the attributes inspector. I'll click that is the initial view controller. I'm going to set its the title of the table view controller, not as root view controller, but fonts. The word fonts. And actually, I can run it right now. I'll get an empty list, an empty table view, but we should be able to at least see it run. And we get a warning that prototype table cells must have reuse identifiers, and that is indeed true. But it's not a problem, so we don't have any cells, we don't have any data. We just have an outline, but it's not an issue. I don't know why this indexing is happening now and taking so long. While I'm waiting on that, I might as well go ahead and get started creating the stuff I need to create. So I'm going to go back to my project inspector. I'm going to add some view controllers here. The first thing actually I'm going to add is a file to handle that favorites list we were looking at later. And this is just going to be a Swift file. We're going to put a class in it, but it's not a Cocoa Touch class. It's just a Swift class. So, and we're going to call it favorites list. And it needs to be in the main folder here. So let me move it down there. And I'm going to grab some code for this file from the book source code. and talk about what's going on in it. So we've got this class favorites list, and we're going to create a variable called the shared favorites list as a property of the class. We're going to use it as a singleton class. There'll only be the one instance of it. And then this is the main piece of model data. It's going to be a list, an array of strings. We'll create an initialization function. For now, don't worry about this defaults code. What we're going to do is use persistent storage to keep track of our favorites from run to run of this app, and we'll we'll cover that in a future module. But what we're doing here is if stored favorites object exists, then we're going to load it from the defaults, which is a way of storing things persistently for a given app. Otherwise, we'll initialize it. Then we just have functions to add a favorite, remove a favorite, save the favorites list, which will again, using the defaults mechanism, store that in persistent storage for future use. And then we have this function move item, which we're going to use to, if we edit the favorites list, which we'll talk about doing towards the end of the chapter, this is the code that'll run to actually rearrange where the font is stored in the underlying data structure. And it makes sense. It's just going to call the remove and insert methods on the favorites array, much as the add and remove functions do. So with that in our back pocket, let's create a view controller for our root view. So we're going to add another file. This time we are adding a CocoaTouch class. And we're going to call it root view controller, and its subclass is UI view controller. Actually, we're going to subclass UI table view controller. And let me go back up and edit this so that it matches the name the book uses. And we'll create that class. So in this root view controller, we're going to need to do some things in vid1 related to getting the favorites out of memory, out of persistent memory and whatnot. We're also going to use a new method, view will appear, which runs each time this view comes up. Vid1 only runs once. When the view is initially loaded. It doesn't have anything to do with it as to regarding whether or not the view is displayed. So we'll run vid1 on startup, and then just before the view is displayed, each time we come back to this view through the navigation controller mechanism, we'll run the view will appear method. Of course, since this is a table view, we're also going to have to add some data source methods for the table view, and a little method to help things along called font for display. So let's grab those things out of the book source code. So we're going to have a bunch of data properties in this class, and I'll go ahead and put them in. We're going to have an array of strings. This is where we'll load the font family names from the when we initialize those to look at the size that we're using, the favorites list, and a couple of strings that we'll use in naming things. In vid1 we'll initialize our list of family names. Let me grab that code. We're making system calls here to a class UI font. So all the family names that are available, we'll make an assorted array of strings. And there's a preferred font method that we can call, and we'll set the preferred font for the table view to be that. We'll get the size from there, and we'll get the favorites list from the shared favorites list property in our custom favorites list class, which we created a little bit ago. And as we'll estimate the row height of our table view based on the size of this preferred font we're using. So here's a little helper method. We're going to reload the table data from each time we display the view. So that'll be a useful thing to have there. And we're going to leave this alone. I'm going to comment out the built-in data source methods because we're replacing those. And everything else is commented out. We're going to leave that commented out. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and delete it just to clean things up. And let me get the table view methods here. The data source methods for the root table view. Okay. So how many sections are in the table? Well, it depends on if there are any favorites. If the favorites list is empty, there's one section. Otherwise, there are two. How many rows are in the section? If it's the first section, it's the count of fonts in the family names variable. Otherwise, it's one, just the favorites link that links us to the list of favorites. That's how we're going to handle that transition, by clicking on that favorites cell. Section titles we'll set with this little function, and then the last function tells what we're going to display there. And there are two pieces to this. If the section is 0, we're going to show the list of font names. If the section is the favorites list, it's just going to be a single cell called the favorites cell. And to know which type of cell to use, we're using these static variables that we defined up here. Which we now need to go ahead and make prototypes for in the storyboard. And this indexing that's been going on ever since the video started, clearly something's wrong here. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to get that stopped. And in the next video, we'll begin with editing the storyboard for the table view controller, which is our root view controller, and then we'll run again. Well, we'll run and test that. So I will see you again in the next video.